The door slammed behind her hard enough to shake dust from the frame, and when her bag hit the ground, no one moved to help. So why did the tall man across the street finally step forward, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment? The wind dragged grit across the wooden porch as she steadied herself, one hand braced against the post, the other tightening around a worn cloth bag. Voices murmured inside the saloon, then faded like she'd already been erased. She didn't knock again, just bent, slow but steady, gathering the papers that had slipped loose. Numbers, neat and precise, not the kind a drifter carried. Across the road, a man stood beneath a sagging awning, reins looped in one hand, watching without hurry, not stepping in, not looking away either. When she finally straightened, their eyes met, hers sharp, unyielding, his unreadable. He crossed the dirt road then, boots measured, like he wasn't answering a scene, but finishing something already begun. "Out here," he said quietly. "Most folks don't hold the door." She didn't reply, just waited. "I hold ground." She glanced past him, toward the open stretch beyond town, like she was weighing something bigger than shelter. And for a second, it felt like the next step might cost more than either of them was saying. Would you have taken that offer, or walked the other way? The wind came low and steady through silver dust crossing, dragging grit across the wooden boards and rattling the loose hinge of the back door. It slammed once, then it opened just enough to let a woman stumble out. Ruth Whitaker caught herself on the frame, her hand pressing flat against the wood before it slipped. A small cloth bag followed her, hitting the dirt with a dull thud. No one inside called her name. No one held the door. It shut behind her like it had nothing to do with her at all. She stood there a moment, breathing shallow, one shoulder rising higher than the other. Then she bent down, careful, slow. Her right foot dragged just a little behind the left as she reached for the bag. A notebook slid free. It landed open in the dust. Pages fluttered in the wind, tight columns of numbers, neat lines, totals marked and corrected, dates written small in the corners. Not the kind of thing a drifter carried, not the kind of thing anyone left behind by accident. Across the street, under the slanted roof of a feed store, Isaiah Crowell watched without moving. He had one hand resting on a saddle, fingers still dark with oil. The horse beside him shifted, snorted once, then went quiet again. Isaiah didn't step forward when the door slammed, didn't step forward when she stumbled, but he didn't look away either. Ruth gathered the pages with both hands, brushing dirt from the shim with the edge of her sleeve. She didn't rush, didn't glance back at the door. When she stood again, she held the notebook close to her chest like it might come apart if she didn't. That's when Isaiah crossed the street. His boots hit the boards with a steady rhythm, slow but certain. He stopped a few feet from her, close enough to see the dust on her collar, the worn seam along her sleeve, the way her jaw held tight even when she said nothing. He didn't ask what happened, didn't ask who threw her out. He looked once at the closed door behind her, then back at her. "Folks here don't keep doors open," he said. His voice was low, not rough, just settled, like he'd said things like that before and didn't need to raise it. Ruth didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on him, steady, measuring, not soft, not asking. Isaiah shifted his weight slightly, the wood creaking under him. "But I keep land," he added, "and I don't turn people off it without reason." The wind pushed between them again, lifting a loose strand of her hair. She didn't tuck it back. For a second, it looked like she might walk past him. Just keep going down the road, where the dust thinned out into open ground. Instead, she glanced down at the notebook in her hands, then back at him. "Land needs more than fences," she said quietly. "Needs numbers that hold." Isaiah's eyes dropped to the edge of the pages, the ink lines, the careful marks. He nodded once. "Then you'd have work," he said. No promise beyond that. No kindness dressed up to sound bigger than it was. Just a place. And a condition. Ruth shifted her bag higher on her shoulder. The movement was small, but it took effort. He saw it. Didn't comment. She looked past him, toward the road leading out of town. The sky had gone darker now, the last light caught behind the hills. When she spoke again, it wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. "How far?" she asked. Isaiah turned, already stepping back toward his horse. "Far enough no one's watching the door," he said. He didn't look back to see if she followed, but he slowed his pace just enough that she could. The road out of Silver Dust Crossing stretched thin and pale under the fading light. Dust clung to their boots, rising with each step and settling again like it had nowhere better to be. Isaiah walked beside his horse, one hand resting near the reins. Ruth kept a few paces behind at first, then evened out, her stride measured, steady despite the drag in her step. They didn't talk much. Once, near a dry creek bed, Isaiah passed her a canteen without turning his head. She took it, drank, and handed it back without a word. The water was warm, but it held. By the time the sky turned black and the stars came through clear, Cedar Run Ridge stood ahead of them. A low house, a long fence line, a windmill creaking slow with each turn. A lantern burned near the porch, steady against the dark. Isaiah opened the gate, holding it wide. Ruth stepped through without hesitation this time. Inside, the place was simple. A wooden table near the window, a shelf lined with tin cups and a coffee pot that looked like it had seen years of early mornings. The air carried the smell of leather and dry grass. He set a small oil lamp on the table and lit it. "You'll sleep there," he said, nodding toward a narrow room off the side. "Work starts when the sun does." Ruth set her bag down carefully. She took out the notebook, placed it flat on the table, and ran her hand over the cover like she was making sure it hadn't changed shape. In the morning, the ranch woke before the light fully settled. Isaiah was already outside, fixing a loose hinge on the gate when Ruth stepped out. She'd tied her hair back. Her sleeves were rolled just enough to show she meant to use her hands. He pointed once toward the table inside. "Books are there." That was all. Ruth sat down and opened the ledgers stacked in a neat pile. The paper was thick, worn at the edges. Ink marks faded in places, pressed too hard in others. She turned pages slowly at first, then faster. Numbers told stories. Some of them didn't line up. Midday came with the sound of hooves on hard ground. Travis Cole rode in, his hat low, a coil of rope hanging from his saddle. He greeted Isaiah with a nod, then glanced toward the open door. "She knew?" he asked. Isaiah didn't look up from the fence post he was setting. "She works the books." Travis leaned slightly, just enough to see inside. Ruth didn't lift her head. Her pencil moved steady across the page, marking, correcting, circling something that didn't sit right. "Hope she's better than the last man you had," Travis muttered. Isaiah drove the nail in with one clean strike. "She is." Inside, Ruth paused, not at the words, but at the ledger in front of her. A column didn't match the totals written 2 pages later. Same date, same cattle count, different numbers. She flipped back, then forward again. Her finger rested on a line that had been scratched over once, then written again, cleaner, like someone thought no one would look twice. Ruth leaned back slightly in the chair. It was too low for the table. She adjusted, then stood, dragging a second crate over to sit on instead. Later that afternoon, Isaiah came in and found a small pile of pages set aside. Not torn, just marked. He didn't ask what she found. She didn't offer it yet. Instead, she pointed to the back step. "The board's loose," she said. Isaiah walked out and checked it. It was. By evening, there was a new plank nailed in place. A small thing, but it held firm under weight. The next morning, a taller chair appeared at the table. Ruth didn't mention it. She just sat and kept working. Days settled into a rhythm. Coffee at dawn, dust rising under boots, pages turning under careful hands. But the numbers didn't quiet. They shifted, and somewhere between one page and the next, something kept slipping away. Ruth sat with that thought longer than the numbers themselves. The wind outside had picked up again, pushing dust along the fence line. The gate creaked once, then settled. Inside, the only sound was the scratch of her pencil and the faint tap of the chair leg against the floor whenever she adjusted her weight. She marked another line. Same pattern. Same kind of mistake. If it was a mistake. By the time Isaiah came in near dusk, she had 3 pages set aside. Not stacked, spread out, like she wanted to see how they spoke to each other. He noticed, didn't touch them. "You eat?" he asked. She shook her head once, eyes still on the page. He set a plate down anyway. Bread, beans, a piece of dried meat wrapped in cloth. He didn't say more, just moved past her and washed his hands at the basin. Outside, a rider slowed near the fence, then another. Ruth didn't look up until she heard voices. Low, not friendly, not loud enough to be called a greeting either. Isaiah stepped back out. Harlan Pike sat tall in his saddle, coat clean despite the road. His horse stood still like it knew better than to move without being told. Behind him, Deputy Lorne Hayes leaned slightly forward, one hand resting near his belt, eyes scanning the place like he was measuring it. "Crowell," Pike said, easy, like they'd shared better days than they had. Isaiah didn't come closer, just stood where the dirt met the boards. "What brings you out here?" he asked. Pike smiled faintly. "Business. Thought I'd save you the trouble of losing time on something that's already decided." Isaiah didn't answer that. Hayes glanced toward the open door, toward the table inside. "Word travels," he said. "You got someone working your books now." Isaiah followed his gaze, then looked back at them. "I do." Pike shifted in his saddle. "Careful who you trust with numbers," he said. "Some folks have a way of making things disappear." Inside, Ruth's hand stopped moving. She didn't turn toward the door, didn't step out. But she listened. Travis Cole hadn't come by that day, nor the day before. The delivery ledger showed a gap where his name usually sat. Ruth's fingers pressed lightly against the page. Outside, Pike leaned forward just enough to be heard clearly. "I've got an offer," he said. "Land's worth more in the right hands. I'd pay fair, better than fair, considering the trouble brewing around your name." Isaiah's expression didn't change. "Not for sale." Pike's smile held, but it thinned at the edges. "Everything is," he said. "Just depends on when a man realizes it." Hayes tapped his fingers once against his belt, then pushed his hat back slightly. "Would hate to see a place like this tied up in questions," he added. "Folks don't trade easy with uncertainty." Silence stretched. The wind carried a loose sheet of paper off the table inside. It slid across the floor, stopping near the doorway. Ruth stood then. Not fast, not loud. She walked to the paper, bent, picked it up, and set it back with the others. Then she moved to the doorway. She didn't step outside, just stood there. Pike's eyes shifted to her, brief, assessing, then away again, like he'd already decided something. Isaiah didn't look back at her. Not yet. "We're done here," he said. Pike held his gaze a moment longer. Then he nodded once, slow. "For now." He turned his horse. Hayes followed, casting one last look over his shoulder before they rode off, dust trailing behind them like a line drawn in the air. The yard went quiet again. Isaiah stayed where he was until the sound of hooves faded. Then he stepped back inside. Ruth had already gathered her notebook. Her bag sat near the door, not packed, but not settled either. He looked at it, then at her. She didn't speak, didn't ask if what Pike said was true, didn't deny anything either. The space between them felt different now, not broken, just thinner. Isaiah walked past her and set another log on the stove. "You leaving?" he asked, not turning around. Ruth adjusted the strap of her bag. "I've seen this before," she said quietly. "Same kind of numbers, same kind of silence after." He let that sit. "Then you know how it ends?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes moved once across the room. The table, the chair that fit now, the ledgers stacked where she'd left them. "I know how it starts," she said. Outside, the wind picked up again. Inside, neither of them moved for a long time. The lamp flickered once, then steadied. Shadows shifted along the wall, stretching the shape of the table, the chair, the two of them standing in the same room, but not quite sharing it. Isaiah reached for his hat, set it down again instead. "You don't have to stay," he said. Ruth didn't answer. She walked back to the table, laid her notebook flat, and slid one of the marked pages toward the center. Her finger rested on a line that had been written twice. "Same count," she said. "Different total. Happens more than once." Isaiah stepped closer, not over her shoulder, beside her, close enough to see, not close enough to crowd. He didn't touch the page. "Could be a mistake," he said. Ruth shook her head. "Not like this." She flipped to another page, then another. Each one carried the same quiet difference, small enough to pass, large enough to matter over time. Isaiah exhaled slowly. "Who's been keeping these?" she asked. "Man named Keegan," Isaiah said. "Left last winter. Said he was done with the road." Ruth nodded once, like that confirmed something she already suspected. "And before him?" Isaiah thought a moment. "Didn't keep books close before that. Hired hands came and went." Ruth closed the ledger gently. "That's how it works," she said. "You don't see it until it's already been happening." The room went quiet again. This time Isaiah moved first. He grabbed his coat from the peg, pulled it on, and reached for the lantern. "I'll be back before morning," he said. Ruth looked up. "Where?" "Town." She didn't ask why. She already knew. Isaiah stepped outside, the cold air catching him sharp across the face. He saddled his horse without rushing, hands steady even as the wind pulled at the edges of his coat. By the time the first light broke across the horizon, he was standing in front of a narrow shack at the edge of Silver Dust Crossing. Old Man Keegan answered the door slow, eyes narrowing before he recognized the man standing there. "Crowell," he muttered. "Didn't think you'd come looking." Isaiah didn't step inside until Keegan moved aside. The place smelled of stale coffee and paper gone soft with time. A crate sat near the wall, filled with old receipts, torn ledgers, bits of string tied around stacks that had been meant to hold. Isaiah set one of Ruth's marked pages on the table. Keegan stared at it longer than he needed to. "You found it," he said. Isaiah didn't respond. Keegan let out a breath that sounded like it had been waiting months. "Same thing happened with the freight line 2 towns over," he said. "Numbers shaved small, spread wide. No one notices till it's too late to prove." Isaiah leaned one hand against the table. "Who?" he asked. Keegan's eyes shifted toward the window. "You already know the name," he said. Silence stretched. Then Keegan added, quieter this time. There was a woman. Saw it first. Tried to bring it forward. Isaiah's jaw tightened. What happened to her? Keegan didn't look at him. Same thing that always happens. Folks didn't want trouble tied to their books. Easier to say she made it. Isaiah picked up the page, folded it once. He didn't say thank you. Didn't need to. By late afternoon, he found Ruth where Keegan said she might be. A warehouse at the edge of town, half empty. Doors hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Inside, a few workers moved sacks from one corner to another, paid by the hour. No questions asked. Ruth stood near a stack of crates, hands steady as she tied off a bundle. Her bag sat near her feet. She looked up when Isaiah stepped in. Didn't seem surprised. He walked straight to her, set the folded page on top of the crate between them. If I'm wrong, he said, I lose the land. Ruth didn't touch the paper. And if you're right? She asked. Isaiah met her eyes. You lose it again. The noise in the warehouse faded behind them. Ruth looked down at the page, then at her own hands. For a long moment she didn't move. Then she pushed the bundle aside and stepped back. I'm not going back to stand behind someone, she said. Not to be pointed at when it breaks. Isaiah nodded once. I'm not asking you to. She held his gaze, searching for something that wasn't spoken. The wind pushed through the open door behind him, carrying dust across the floor between them. Neither of them stepped away, but neither of them stepped closer either. The warehouse door creaked as the wind pushed through again, lifting dust along the floor between them. Somewhere behind, a crate shifted. A man coughed. Life went on like nothing important stood in that space. Ruth broke the stillness first, not by moving toward him, but by reaching for the paper. She unfolded it slowly. Her eyes moved across the lines once, then again, longer this time. You went to Keegan, she said. Isaiah didn't answer. He didn't need to. Ruth let the paper rest on the crate. Her hand stayed on it a moment longer than necessary, like she was weighing more than numbers. They won't want to hear it, she said. I know. They'll listen to him before they listen to me. Isaiah nodded. I know that too. Silence settled again. Not empty this time, just full of something neither of them rushed. Ruth lifted her bag and set it on her shoulder. Not to leave, just to carry it right. When? She asked. Tomorrow, Isaiah said. Town meeting, land claims, trade rights. Ruth let out a slow breath. Then we don't stand together, she said. Isaiah looked at her. We stand right, she added. Not close. A small shift passed through him. Not surprise, not resistance, just understanding settling into place. He gave a single nod. The next morning came dry and sharp, the kind of morning where sound carried farther than it should. Silver dust crossing gathered slow, boots on boards, voices low. The meeting room filled with men who owned land, men who wanted it, and men who made decisions about both. Harlan Pike stood near the front, coat clean again, boots polished enough to catch light. Deputy Hayes leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes watching the room without looking like he cared. Isaiah entered without drawing attention. He took a place near the back, didn't step forward, didn't speak. Ruth came in a few moments later. She didn't stand beside him. She walked straight down the center of the room and stopped where the light from the window fell across the table. A few heads turned. Not all. Pike saw her. His expression didn't change, but his hand rested flatter on the table. The meeting began with routine talk, boundaries, water rights, supply lines. Then Pike spoke. Before we move forward, he said, voice steady. There's a matter of reliability tied to certain properties outside town. He didn't say Isaiah's name. Didn't need to. A few glances shifted toward the back. Trade depends on trust, Pike continued. And there are questions, records that don't hold. Ruth stepped forward. Not fast, not loud, just enough to change where the room was looking. She placed her notebook on the table, opened it. I'd like to speak to that, she said. No one interrupted. Not because they agreed, because they were waiting. Ruth turned the pages, one by one, laying them flat. Dates, totals, repeated entries, differences small enough to ignore, large enough to matter. These numbers don't fail all at once, she said. They slip, a little at a time. Same pattern, same spacing. She slid another sheet forward. Same roots, same partners. A murmur moved through the room. Deputy Hayes shifted his weight but didn't step in. Pike's eyes narrowed slightly. That's a heavy claim, he said, for someone not tied to any property here. Ruth met his gaze. I'm tied to the numbers, she said. The room went still. Isaiah didn't move, didn't step forward to stand beside her. He stayed where he was, behind her, not in front. Pike leaned forward, one hand pressing into the table. Anyone can write numbers, he said. Doesn't make them true. Ruth didn't argue. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded receipt. Old, worn at the edges. Set it beside the ledger. Then we follow them, she said, line by line. The room shifted again. Not loud, but different. This time, a few men stepped closer. Questions came, not from Pike, from others. Dates were checked, names repeated, roots compared. Pike didn't stop them, couldn't without drawing more. Deputy Hayes looked down once, then away. Isaiah watched it unfold the way a man watches weather roll in, not rushing it, not turning from it. By the time the last page was laid out, no one was looking at Isaiah anymore. They were looking at Pike. Silence held. Then someone near the window spoke first. That's enough, he said. Not loud, but it carried. Pike straightened slowly. His hand left the table. He didn't argue, didn't deny, he just stepped back, and for the first time since he'd entered the room, he had nowhere to stand that didn't feel smaller. Ruth closed the notebook. She didn't wait for anyone to thank her. Didn't look back toward Isaiah. She turned and walked out the same way she came in. The street outside was quiet again, wind low, dust settling. Isaiah followed, slower. He caught up with her near the edge of town, where the road split, one path leading back to Cedar Run Ridge, the other stretching out toward open land. Ruth. She stopped. Didn't turn right away. When she did, her eyes held steady, not guarded, not open, just sure. I don't keep you because you need a place, Isaiah said. The wind moved between them, softer now. I keep you because I haven't met anyone I'd rather stand with. Ruth looked past him once, toward the road that led back, then down at the ground between her boots. When she spoke, it wasn't quick. Standing isn't the hard part, she said. Staying is. Isaiah didn't argue, didn't promise anything he couldn't hold. He just waited. After a moment, Ruth adjusted the strap on her shoulder. Then she stepped past him. Not away. Toward the road that led back to Cedar Run Ridge. They walked side by side this time. Not close, not distant. Just even. The fence came into view by late afternoon. The windmill turned slow above it. The house stood the same as before. Nothing grand. Nothing changed. except the door. It stayed open. That evening, Ruth sat at the table again, the taller chair still there, the ledgers stacked. She opened a new page, wrote the date. Isaiah stood out by the fence, one hand resting on the top rail. He didn't look back right away. When he did, he saw the light in the window. Steady. Holding. And for the first time, it didn't look like something that might go out. It looked like something meant to stay. And maybe that's all a place ever really is. Not the land, not the fence lines, not even the house standing against the wind. It's the moment someone chooses not to turn away. Ruth had been pushed out of more than one door before she ever reached Silver Dust Crossing. And Isaiah, he'd spent years standing his ground, believing that was enough. But standing alone and standing with someone, those are not the same thing. What they found wasn't rescue. It wasn't even certainty. It was something quieter. A man who didn't rush in to save but stayed long enough to be trusted. A woman who didn't wait to be chosen, but decided where she would stand, and who deserved to stand beside her. Out there, where the wind keeps moving and nothing holds unless you make it, that kind of choice matters. So maybe the question isn't whether love arrives. Maybe it's whether, when it does, you have the courage to stay and let someone stay with you. If you were in her place, would you have walked back to that fence or kept going? And if stories like this stay with you a little longer than they should, there are more waiting just down the road.